What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that are new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. And as you can tell from the title down below, we are here once again to review episode 8. This is episode 8 of our show, as well as episode 8 of the Shadows over Innistrad story. We are Vorthos players, once again, for those of you that might be new, and we are here to show off our hashtag Vorthos Pride.
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
And we are going to talk about Liliana's Indignation. I was super excited for this one, especially because I really enjoyed so much, and I think both of us did, the last interaction between Liliana and Jace, and how light and fun and sarcastic it was. And this one was not at all. I mean, there was still some tension in there, whether it be sexual tension. Amy, for those of you that missed the episode where we talked about it, Amy thinks that they act like exes a lot, and they did a lot more of it this time.
A lot more of it.
Like, he had his head in her lap, and she was, like, petting his hair. Very weird, because it started off with her almost literally trying to kill him. Because he was attacking her mind, and there was a lot, or there were, I should say, a lot of references to prior stories that involved Liliana and Jace. Stuff that me personally, and I know both of us really, are not familiar with, because we started getting involved in reading the stories online when they started being put online, which means that a lot of the stuff relating to the Chain Veil and the Raven Man, that stuff was before our time, if you want to say it that way. So if any of you guys have revelations about that kind of stuff, and
insight,
thank you, makes more sense, put that in the comments down below. We always love to hear theories in the comments or on Facebook and Twitter. Those links are in the description. So feel free to talk to us about that kind of stuff. But it was a little frustrating for me, because just in terms of our time allotment, we didn't necessarily have time to go back and research the Chain Veil and research the Raven Man. I would have loved to have had that kind of time, and if I can go back, no, you wouldn't want that.
I don't know how necessary it was, but again, I can't really say that yet, because they didn't really dive very deeply into those characters.
Well, I mean, but
those two things.
Right, and I mean, I guess there was that one time where they talked about Jace, and they mentioned how the last time he had lost his mind, or the last time he had become so powerful, he like locked his mind away, and the only way to bring him out of it was to have a friend die. Like, a lot of things had to happen, and a friend had to die. I don't remember that story. You know, I wish, maybe it's from Magic Origins, and I haven't delved enough into the Magic Origins story, which is online, but that's a lot to read, you know, Jace's story and Liliana's story, in addition to this story, to be able to understand all of what happened. And I don't want them to not talk about those things, because that is part of the world that they're building. I just felt a little left out personally from those things.
I mean, I don't know. I didn't feel like it was anything different from the norm, because I feel like normally, you know, we're introduced to all of these characters that we don't know, and we're told random things about them, and then the story just moves on.
Well, but I think
so it felt very samey.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it does that in Innistrad or Shadows over Innistrad, like in these stories, when they introduce the Hunters or they introduce Arlen Cord, like, we don't know anything about those characters yet, right? Yeah. But the word yet, because we're going to find out. You know, they introduce Nahiri, and we don't know anything about present Nahiri yet. But at the same time, we don't know where the Raven Man came from, but it has already been explained in Magic Origins. We don't know the origins of the Chain Veil, but that has already been explained at an earlier point. So there may not be a payoff for us unless we go and find them, which is fine. I mean, that's and from a business standpoint, I can totally understand why Wizards of the Coast is doing that, for a couple of reasons. I mean, the one is obvious, that it'll make you go back and it'll make you read more stuff, maybe just online, right? You want to learn about the Raven Man. Okay, great. Read it on Magic Origins, on Uncharted Realms. Great. So you get to be on the website more, they get more clicks, and etc. Yeah. But for earlier stuff like the Chain Veil, if I'm remembering correctly, that's not from Magic Origins. It may be from like M13, M14, M15, something like that. One of the last core sets, and that may mean that we would have to go to one of the novels to find out that story, or the Jace, thing that they talked about, and that would mean that we would have to go and try to find that book somewhere, which I would still love. I mean, I'm a Vorthos, to the end, so I wouldn't not enjoy that, but it's a pain in the butt when this story comes out and I want to read this story, and now it's like, oh, well, I can't understand parts of this story because I have to go back and try to find all the different pieces that they're referencing, and the fact that they don't tell you where to find those pieces, so you'd have to guess or look it up online or ask good people who might be watching our video to tell us where to find it. But, whether you guys...
Leave a comment explaining the information so we don't have to look it up.
That's a lot of typing.
You're real nice.
That's a lot of typing. If you guys want to do that, you're welcome to. That'd be amazing. But, yeah, if you want to, link us to the sources of them, I would love that. I think that'd be fantastic. Yeah. I'd do it on my leisure. I'd have to try to find some time to do it.
Wizards should do that. I feel like with each story, if there's some sort of an older story that in some way pairs with it, to kind of give you more context, they should have, somebody at least write up a synopsis of that story and then, have a link to it.
Either write up a synopsis, or what they kind of did with the intro. They have a little intro before every story, which is in italics, and it's like 3 or 4 lines, just the teaser for the story itself, which I can understand when it's on the kind of the patchwork screen in the beginning where you can choose between episodes, because when you click on it, it gives you a preview of what's going to be in that episode. But then when you click on that episode, you've presumably said, I'm going to read this one now, and then they have a slightly more detailed version of that teaser at the start of the story, which I don't fully understand, because they've already teased it, you've already clicked on it, which means you want to read it, and now they're teasing it further, even though you're just going to immediately, after you read that teaser, start reading the actual text of the story. But what it did do in this week's teaser, and it may have done in the past, I just haven't necessarily thought of it, was it highlighted different terms. So, it would say, Liliana had an uninvited guest recently, which was Jace. And if you clicked on an uninvited guest, Jace, it would take you to the story of Jace and Liliana the first time they met on Innistrad.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I think that makes perfect sense. But that's within this set. So that was, 3 episodes ago in that exact story. So I could just hit the back button and find the last time that they met, as opposed to the Chainveil story or the Jace, locking his mind away story, which would presumably not, in my opinion, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but would not necessarily be online in a findable place within the story archive online. It would have to be found in a novel, or, I'm sure I could find it on Wikipedia if I looked it up on Wikipedia, which would also be fine. But, trying to find the original work, because one, I enjoy Magic as a game, I enjoy Wizards of the Coast, and I'm definitely not one to advocate, I could just find it torrented online or something like that. It's a book, so that's not a thing as much, but finding the text online that someone transposed and just put online somewhere, I'd rather buy the book itself and actually read the full story and get all of it, or as opposed to reading a synopsis on Wikipedia. That may be a little preachy, and that's not what I'm going for, but at the same time, that would be kind of beneficial to them, is if they talk about a story like that, maybe have a footnote. I know that footnotes kind of freak people out, where it's like, it's like a research paper or a legal paper, and I don't want to have to read footnotes when I'm reading a fantasy story like Magic, but, link us to it. I feel like we've talked about this a little too much. AKA, I've talked about this a little too much.
Yeah.
So, anyway, from the story itself, let me see if you and I are similar on this.
Okay.
If in a week's time or 2 weeks' time, what is the takeaway what's the thing you're going to remember the most about this story?
Whoa.
I've never asked this before. Maybe this should be a thing.
I don't know.
for the
What's
future.
yours?
Mine is how hilarious. For you guys that don't know, I read the story to the both of us. I thought that it was hilarious being able to read Jace's conversation to Liliana once he kind of stopped trying to read her mind and she stopped trying to kill him.
And whatever other thing he happened to be talking to.
There were a couple things, because the lightning crashed and the thunder rumbled, and he looked outside and he was like, yeah, that's the word, thanks.
Right.
And then, like, looked at the zombie next to him that didn't say anything, and he was like, shut up, I get it. And, like, I was like, what? He was talking to the thunder, and he was talking to a zombie that didn't say anything, and the whole time Liliana's like, that's odd. You know, like, she didn't, like, go any further than, like, that's a little weird. He's not quite being himself. You know, like, what? Why would you not be more concerned about it? He's babbling complete nonsense. I also really liked when she asked about the journal, and he was like, you're not reading it. And she was like, okay, I won't read it.
I was like, my precious.
Yeah.
The One Ring.
Yes, which is perfect. I had not made that comparison, and she mentioned it, and I think that's great. But it was super funny. I mean, at the same time, it's kind of terrifying, because the story ended with Jace just being like, well, if it's not you who did this stuff at the Drown Yard, I gotta go find out who it is. I gotta go to Thraben. I'm probably gonna die when I get there, so sorry.
I'm just gonna wander around endlessly until I find something.
Well, because he was like...
I'll probably die.
Well, because at first he was looking for Soren. Now he was looking for and found Liliana. And then he's like, all right, I'll look for Avacyn now. And Liliana's like, she's going to kill you.
Right.
And he's like, I got to look for her anyway. And then said to her, he's like, yeah, I'm going to die, sorry.
Well, I mean, at this point he's crazy, but before, he did the same thing with Soren.
He did do the same thing with Soren.
He was just rational when he did it.
Well, and I thought that Liliana...
The same thing.
Yeah, and Liliana did the same thing too. Where she was like, don't go. And he was like, okay, but I'm going to go, though.
Right.
And she was like, all right, well, don't. I told you not to. And he was like, okay, but I'm going to. And she was like, all right. And just let him go. And, like, that time she was like, the first time when he was just going to find Soren, she was like, well, he's dumb.
Right.
This time she actually was like, I'm worried for him. You know,
yeah,
and
she's like, he's crazy. Like, I need to keep him here and try to help him and try to, like, cure his mind. So I don't know why you say that you think she wasn't that concerned. I definitely feel that she was.
No, I think she was. I'm talking about at that exact moment. I think she was trying to find a way to, like, talk to him, and she was kind of talking to him like he was a little kid.
Right.
She'd be like, okay, well let's maybe do this.
They made a couple of references to the fact that his mind was like a child's mind.
And that he looked very young.
Yeah.
But she's also ageless. You know, she's super old. She was born a long time ago, so...
I don't think that's really a comparison.
I don't necessarily think so either, but we've talked about Soren, who is millennia plus old. We've talked about Nahiri, who's been around for millennia. So these planeswalkers who are meeting a mortal, you know, someone who would have a lifespan that we would be familiar with or more familiar with, they would probably look at these young, super powerful planeswalkers as like infants with a lot of power. And so that was to a degree what I took it as. I get that, like, he was babbling like a child and, like, his mind was kind of reverting back to a childlike, you know, and you mentioned ADHD as well, just like, talking about this, now I'm talking about this, now I'm talking about this, and this word reminds me of this sentence. Like, it was so weird. But
I just kept on laughing while he was reading it.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, he's starting to sound like me. We got issues.
The one point that I can remember...
You need some healing now.
Yeah. The one point that I can remember word for word was when he was talking about the Drown Yard, and he was asking Liliana what happened to the Drown Yard, and he was like, drown, drawn. I was drawn there, and it was like, oh my god. You know, just the comparisons being drawn, which, from a writing perspective, that's hilarious. You know, that they were able to make that conclusion or to draw that conclusion even. Between those two words, I think that was very clever, but it was also just very weird. Yeah. Like, it was just so weird. I love it, and I've been saying kind of throughout all these videos, Jace is just slowly being made to look weaker and weaker, and that's probably because, like, hey, you're a super powerful telepath. We need to kind of, to use geek terms, we need to nerf you a little bit because you're super strong and no one can do anything to you. Well, hey, guess what? You're going up against a lot of mindless things. So don't try to read their mind because they'll make you go crazy, but you're on a plane that's already going to make you go crazy, and you're going to talk to journals and befriend books. Like, so weird. Especially coming from Zendikar, where I know that they tried to make it seem like he did a lot. I really didn't feel like he did a lot on Zendikar. Like, he was the one who created the imagery of, okay, this is where all the Hedrons have to go to imprison Ulamog. But besides that, it was like, anytime he came up against an Eldrazi, he was like, I can't do anything against this thing. It's going to kill me. And somebody had to come in and save him. You disagree?
Yeah.
All right. That's fine.
I think he had to make the Hedrons go where they needed to go, and he needed to direct Nissa to make things work properly.
Okay.
And I think if he hadn't done that, she might not have been able to make it work just right, and it would have been a failure.
Correct. Well, and yet it was a failure. Right, I mean, and that's through no fault of either of theirs.
Right.
I get that, because Obnixilis is a jerk, but
though. Yeah. And I mean, none of them can go up against an Eldrazi and survive.
Well, no. I don't mean an Eldrazi Titan. I mean the little individual ones, like that Gideon was killing left and right with his Surl, and Chandra's burning them alive.
But the point was, in that, they were trying to, really show the differences between the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since they knew that later on they were going to make it so that they formed a pact or whatever, an oath.
Right.
If they were going to be a team, they needed to fulfill those separate sort of stereotypical roles, and not necessarily coincide those, just as a way to be like, oh, this is the person that this person can relate to. And,
right.
Like a TV show. There's no, like, characters from TV shows aren't like real people. Real people are more well-rounded than that, you know?
Well, and the thing I think is interesting, if we bring it back to Innistrad, I think the cool thing is, I don't remember whether I mentioned this. I know I thought it, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned it in one of these videos. I thought that it was weird that all of this, or maybe you were the one that brought it up, all this stuff is happening on Innistrad, and it's such a threat to the plane, to the sanity of Jace and Liliana, who are planeswalkers who could then go to other places and be crazy there too, which would be dangerous for the populace of wherever they would go.
It could be.
Right,
it
but...
wouldn't necessarily, because at this point we don't know if, like, it could possibly spread or something like that.
Regardless, but my point is that all of these terrible things are happening, and Jace is the only one who went there. Out of the four who had just finished saying to each other, we're going to band together and save the multiverse. That was your point.
Because I was like, what?
And yet now, if you look at it, I don't think anybody expects Jace to have the mental processes to say, you know what I should do? I should stop this. Let me go find Gideon. Let me go find Chandra, and then bring them all back here, and we can all, be Power Rangers together. It's not, that wouldn't happen.
Earth, wind, water,
right?
Fire.
Yeah, to form Captain Multiverse,
right?
And but that wouldn't happen here now that Jace is crazy.
Right.
When it first happened, that was your question, and I think a valid question of, like, what the hell is he doing? Why isn't he going to get help from all these super powerful people that swore to help him protect the multiverse?
Right.
Now it makes sense.
Right.
Because he's not thinking about that now. In fact, he would probably be yelling at them about, don't touch my book.
Right.
Like,
well, but I mean, I guess he was kind of trying to get help from people who are familiar with the plane of Innistrad.
Sora and Liliana, yep.
Instead, which did not work out for him
No.
very well at
Well,
all.
the first time he tried with Liliana, and then when he went and found Soren, made sense, right? He was looking for help from them. Now he's not making sound decisions. He's trying to read Liliana's mind, which I'm also curious, and especially not knowing the story of the Raven Man, I'm curious as to whether that Raven Man is actually in Liliana's mind. Is he just always keeping track of her? Is he just a manifestation of her own psyche?
I just thought of him as one of the demons that she sold her soul to.
Which she was killing. I thought she killed them all. Because that was why she released Avacyn from the Hell Vault, was because Gristlebrand was also in the Hell Vault, and she needed to kill Gristlebrand.
Right, but I thought that there was like a bunch of them.
There were at
she
least
had only killed like 2.
There were at least 4. And again, that's part of the Magic Origin story, which
I strongly get the impression from this story that she killed 2 of them.
That you don't have to link us to, because that's in the Magic Origin story. We can check that out ourselves. We'll have to do that. It's just more things that they want us to read, which not upset about it. And to Wizards of the Coast, props, because you're getting people to go back or want to go back and read more stuff.
Or they're just going to be lazy and decide they don't care.
You know what I will also say, since we're talking about Vorthos flavor, there were not a lot of pictures this time around. There were maybe 3 or 4, and the episode was entitled Liliana's Indignation, which is in and of itself a card. And I will say, for those of you that have been watching this whole series, it was either the last episode or the episode before, I called it Liliana's Machinations because I mixed it up with Nahiri's Machinations, which is a white uncommon. This is a black uncommon. But it's Liliana's Indignation, and that's the name of this episode, but it's also the name of one card, which I thought was interesting to name an entire story on one card. And you mentioned that you thought it was shorter than usual. I think that because of the fact that there weren't a lot of pictures, I didn't get that feeling.
Okay.
Usually with the pictures, at least from the perspective of the person who is scrolling through and, hitting page down or whatever as you're going through the story, when you get to a picture, that's a large portion of, hey, look at this picture, now I'm going to scroll all the way up. And so you get to skip past that part of the story, which makes it go a little bit faster.
Okay.
I don't know.
And to me, it just means more scrolling. So.
Well, more scrolling, but less
longer,
but less text. So, yeah, that's why. In this one, I'm pretty sure there were only like 4 or 5 pictures, whereas in others there have been upwards of 12. So it
just feels like less text.
It was drastically different in terms of the number of picture to text ratio. So, yeah. But the other thing was very weird. The Garrett guy,
it can only be Garrett.
which Amy sang every time I mentioned his name, which in no way got annoying.
It's like 2 times.
I know.
Like 3 times tops.
I'm kidding. Anyway, the Garrett shows up at the end.
I said they were exes like a zillion times, and he didn't complain about that.
I was ready for that. I was totally ready for you to just say they're exes the whole time. I was not ready for you to sing a song about weird giant eye Magoo that showed up in the last 2 paragraphs of the story. But I think...
But he can spot those flaws in those diamonds from a mile away. Okay.
I think it was very interesting. I called that card Mad Eye Moody if you guys watched our card openings, our pack openings on the channel. But the fact that he came out and he was funny, man. Like, when he said she was like, how long were you watching? And he was like, that's what I do around here, and pointed at his giant eye. And then at one point he said something and she was like, shut up. And he was like, that's the other thing I do around here. I was like, that's hilarious. This dude's hilarious. And he's only been in 2 paragraphs of the story, and I love him. He's hysterical. Yeah. He mentioned the master is waiting for you, and he mentioned the master's name. And if I wrote it down, that would have probably made a little bit more sense.
Oh, he did mention his name?
Yeah.
Oh.
I feel like it started with a G. Guys something or other.
I don't remember
Geis.
I just assumed it was the Raven Man.
No, you know what? I just thought that it was one of the demons that she was indebted to that you were talking about.
I thought the Raven Man was.
Oh, right. You're right. You said that. You're right. I don't know. We'll see. I'm sure that's coming up, and her art is all over Eldritch Moon. We've talked about this a million times. So presumably, if I had to make a guess, that'll wait for Eldritch Moon. Wherever she just went at the end of the story, I am going to guess that part will wait till Eldritch Moon to talk about.
Which sucks.
It does suck. But at the same time,
she's great.
We've still got, we know, if they introduced Arlen Cord in the I was thinking about this week. If they introduced Arlen Cord in the first story with the hunters to show up and say, stop killing us or hunting us, you're going to need our help, and then we just never see her again for the rest of this story, but she's a card in the set, I'm going to be real upset. Because what was the point? She hasn't done anything. You've introduced her as a planeswalker, let us find out about her. Now, depending on when you're watching this, I may sound like an idiot because at the end of this story, I mentioned to Amy that the preview for next week's story is not up yet. So if episode 9 is all about Arlen Cord, then fine, I put my foot in my mouth. But we'll have to see.
Well, I'm sure you'll do that anyway.
Wow.
That's something else.
Wow. So we'll have to see what the next story is. Like I said, I don't know. They haven't talked about it. Hopefully we'll find out soon. But we've still got, Jace is going to Thraben. We've got to find out what makes Olivia mobilize for war. So we've got to go back to Olivia and Soren. We've got to find out about Nahiri still, because we haven't seen present Nahiri, the Harbinger.
Even a piece of her yet.
Right.
Realistically.
Right. We haven't seen present Nahiri once. So we have to follow Jace to Thraben. We have to get back to Soren and Olivia. We have to find out, to be fair, we have to find out what Olivia wants Soren to do for her, and then find out why she was mobilized for war. We have to find Nahiri, and I'd like for there to be further Arlen Cord discussions, but that's not a requirement, and we also still have to get to Anguished Unmaking, which, as I've said before, I believe that's the 5th and final story point. If that's been out somewhere, I haven't read it, so I'm not just saying, this is my opinion, but I've watched a video where, Mark Rosewater talked about it or something. I haven't seen that video, if it does exist, but that's my guess, is that the 5th and final story point is Anguished Unmaking with Soren taking care of Avacyn, because, to be fair, besides the kind of genocide in that town in episode 2, I believe, we haven't seen Avacyn either. We've heard about her and everybody's been like, ooh, Avacyn, but we haven't seen her any more than that. We haven't really seen Sigarda. She's a mythic in this set. We saw her when Avacyn showed up with the other psycho angels. And
I forgot about Sigarda.
Exactly. But that's my point. They've introduced so many characters and there's so many different threads that need to be tied up, but
how is it going to happen by the end?
Right, yeah. and they're cards in this set. So you would think that, okay, if they're not going to play a big role in this set, but they come up in the story, like Liliana, then okay, save their card for Eldritch Moon. But if they're going to come, if you're making the card be in Shadows over Innistrad, then make them be part of the story in Shadows over Innistrad in a prominent way. At least, again, this is all our opinion. You can disagree. Please feel free to disagree. And again, let us know what you think.
Maybe there's going to be a lot of repeat cards in Eldritch Moon.
I would doubt it. From one set to another, just because of the fact that standard is a thing, and especially because the majority of the things that we're talking about are mythics. Sigarda's a mythic. Arlen Cord's a mythic. Like, all of these cards, and Soren and Nahiri, like, all of these cards are in this set. They're not going to reprint them in the next one. That's why, even though Jace was on Zendikar, he wasn't printed in Zendikar block as a card, because they made him in Magic Origins, and they were making him again in Shadows over Innistrad. And one, you don't want to have your fan base inundated with a billion Jaces, but two, for the perspective of R&D,
don't want your formats inundated with a bunch of different Jaces.
Every format I feel like has its Jace, unfortunately. $100 Varin's Prodigy. But the fact that you could have multiple within standard, that would be a problem, and you wouldn't want that. Although, I guess, like I said, you kind of have to, but yeah, so... and the other thing is for R&D, I was mentioning this earlier, I almost forgot. The other thing for R&D is the more Jaces they print, the closer they are to running out of ideas for Jace Planeswalker cards. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe R&D has ideas for hundreds of new Jaces, but there's only so many times that you can scry, mill your opponent, and draw cards. And so many different ways to do that. So, from a playing perspective, they don't want to print a ton of Jaces because they don't want to run out of ideas for Jaces. Anyway, overall, I thought the story was weird. I thought the story was very flavorful for Innistrad because it showed a lot of madness. Although it showed a lot of compassion on the part of Liliana, despite the fact that the Raven Man was in her head being like, kill him, who cares, just kill him, and like, it was like, holy crap. And she barely considered it. I mean, there was like a moment where she thought about it only because he kept trying to break into her mind and break into her mind, and she felt threatened by that, and so maybe. But at the same time, like, she said, I don't want to kill you, but at the same time...
I don't want to hurt you.
But what she... Right, yes, that's right, because then he said... she said, I don't want to hurt you anymore, and he said, anymore, me, like, referring to the fact that you've already done it. And that was an interesting interaction between the two of them.
Because they're exes.
I was just going to say it to try to steal it from you. I know, because... God. Okay, anyway, yeah, so... That's what happened this time. The story was interesting, the story was weird, but that's Shadows over Innistrad, so I wouldn't expect anything less. And in fact, flavorfully... Yeah. No, flavorfully it wouldn't have made sense if it was just all lovey-dovey and they show up and Jace is like, could you explain this to me? And Liliana's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they're like, okay, and they hug, and like, that's clearly not Innistrad. It's just not, and it's also not Liliana. So, that was this week's story. Do you have anything else you want to talk about this week? We kind of jumped all over the place. Oddly enough, if you follow...
You were Jason it.
Well, I was just going to say, if you follow the track of all these episodes, I feel like we've been doing that. Like in episodes 1 and 2, etc., we were like, okay, this is the story, and then this happened, and then this happened. And like more recently, we've been like, and then in Oath of the Gatewatch, and in Battle for Zendikar, and the Chain Veil, like we're going...
because the further we get, the more we realize how it ties in with other stories. And that's the point.
And the more mad we become.
Right.
So, guys, thank you so much for watching. As we always say, please check out the other stuff on our channel. You can check out subscribe down below. Definitely subscribe down below. Like we said, check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Links are in the description for that. We have tons of Shadows over Innistrad openings. We have the first 7 episodes of this series, if you have not seen it. And, guys, as we always say, from JaAR, I've been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.